Hey everyone, I'm rather incoherent. And seeing as I'm starting a Bless campaign relatively soon, I figured I would talk about my current opinions on Blessed and Curse decks. First, I'm going to very quickly cover my opinion on Curse decks because they're very simple. There are a lot of cards with Curse involved with them, but there are very few actual Curse payoff cards. Things like Blasphemous Covenant are very nice in those decks because they're mitigating the penalty of those Curse tokens. But with the exception of Cryptic Grimoire, it's really the only genuine payoff card worth using for Curse. All the other payoff cards in Curse decks are cards like Flute of the Elder Gods or Gaze of Warwrath. They do involve having curses in the bag for a payoff, but the payoff isn't worth it. Like, even if these cards just did their average effect in a Curse deck, without any requirements, any deck could use them, I still wouldn't be running them. So my opinion on Curse decks is that they aren't really a thing. You might be using a Curse deck, you might be running Favor of the Moon as economy, and you might be running a False Covenant to make the Curse tokens matter less, but that's just because you're playing a lot of cards that put curses in the bag. It's not because you're trying to have a Curse synergy package. You've just made the decision that it's worth mitigating the curses because you have so many Curse cards. There's no capstone card that really, in my opinion, is worth it in those Curse decks. And the exception to that is the Cryptic Grimoires, but unfortunately, since you're the one who has to pull those Curse tokens, in multiplayer games, that gets real awkward real fast. So when it comes to Curse decks, I'm super negative. I have really nothing positive to say about them, and I think it's more about mitigating the penalty of the good Curse cards you're playing than it is about any sort of capstone synergy package where you're building to something. It doesn't feel like an archetype to me at all. It just feels like a pile of cards that all happen to involve Curse. Now that said, I am much more likely to see a Curse card in a given game than a Bless card, because most of the Curse cards that you're likely to put in your deck are things like Deep Knowledge or Faustian Bargain. Cards that are just incredibly good, zero experience cards that either draw cards or give you resources, or Promise of Power, which is just double unexpected courage for one Curse token. The cards that put curses in the bag are really, really good and see a lot of play outside of the Curse decks. The same is not true with the cards that put blesses in the bag, but unlike curses, blesses actually feel like an archetype. They have big, meaningful payoff cards like a Watchful Peace, and they're much more complicated to talk about. My big issue with Bless decks is that the Bless cards are really not cards that you want to be running. And when I say the Bless cards, I mean the ones that put blesses in the bag. Things like Blessed Blade and Book of Psalms are hands-on items that do very, very little. It's a genuinely quite awful weapon unless you're guaranteeing this effect. But if you're guaranteeing this effect, it means you're using a Favor of the Sun, which you only get 3 charges of and is an experience card, and then you have to draw both of them to even use it. Most of the cards that put blesses in the bag are just not very good cards. And that's the big problem with Bless as an archetype. It feels like if you want to put blesses in the bag, you gotta make some sacrifices somewhere, and it really hurts to do that. Now, the best way by far to put blesses in the bag is to play Sister Mary, but again, Sister Mary's a sacrifice. Sister Mary's got a really bad stat line, and she doesn't have the best card pool in the world to make it into something usable. So yes, Sister Mary's putting the blesses in the bag, but just like I don't want to use my hand slot item on a Blessed Blade, I don't want to use my Investigator on a Sister Mary. There's no really good way to put the blesses in the bag. No matter what you do, it's going to be making your deck meaningfully worse to put these blesses into the bag. The only exception to that, pretty much, is Holy Rosary level 2 and Father Mateo. That's like the only character where you're putting blesses in the bag, and all you've done, the only price you paid is for experience. But it's also an unreliable way of putting those blesses in the bag. So for me, the core important question with Bless decks is, will there be a good enough payoff to justify getting these Bless tokens in the bag? In my opinion, Watchful Peace is the best payoff card for Bless decks. It's a 1-cost event for 3 experience. You take 5 Bless tokens out of play or the bag, and then you just skip the draw cards part of the Mythos phase. That's really, really powerful, and obviously very good. The other payoff cards, the biggest one in my opinion is Ancient Covenant, because that just converts the Bless tokens from +2 compared to normal to just flat +2, which may as well be auto-succeed. The Ancient Covenant is also absolutely massive in terms of payoff, and the fact that it's a permanent that can be used on anyone, anywhere is tremendously important. Blessing of Isis is usually a payoff card that is just like not remarkable and not interesting. Turning 2 blesses into a star isn't that reliable of a thing to do. And very frequently, if you're playing a Bless build, you're playing someone with Ancient Covenant who's not even going to be able to use the Blessing of Isis because you're stopping the first time you see a Bless. However, specifically with Father Mateo, it's worth trying to engineer the situation where you see multiple Bless tokens because your star is so powerful. I think outside of Father Mateo, unless I'm forgetting somebody, Blessing of Isis really isn't that relevant as a payoff card. It is also, to a degree, not a payoff card. It's keeping the tokens in the bag, which is a different function, to be fair, but it feels like a payoff card when you're actually running it, because if it's not paying off, if your star isn't this big, meaningful thing where you're orchestrating the double Bless token to get your star, Isis probably isn't making the cut. If you just want to keep the Bless in the bag, you'd probably run Nephthys over this. It's only one more experience in an ally slot. Favor of the Sun has to be mentioned, but it's really more about triggering your Bless effects than it is a payoff card. Hello is a card that makes me very sad. Doom, in my opinion, is never the reason you're running out of time in a scenario. You're running out of health. That's what pushes you out of the scenario. And as a consequence, you really don't need something like Hallow. Especially when you look at how hard it is to really play this. You have to get all 10 Bless tokens into play and then remove all of them from play. This is 3 cost, 3 experience, a card and an action to turn off the archetype you built your deck around. And in exchange, your team gets 1 more turn. At low player counts, this is just obviously bad. The 1 more turn is worth less than just not having bought this card and not having crippled yourself. In larger teams, there's merit to this. But again, it's still probably worse than just spending your 3 experience somewhere else. It's blue 3, so let's just immediately point to standing at level 3 as a different way you could have helped your team more. Holy Spear used to be the big payoff card for the last builds. It technically still is, but with Cyclopean Hammer in the game, it's really hard to look at Holy Spear and feel good about it. I'm going to be running it this campaign to give it its fair shot, but man, for 1 more resource you can play Cyclopean Hammer, and instead of C-winging at +2 and +1 to release Blast tokens, or +4 and +2 to seal 2, and just alternating the big hit, 2 small hits thing, you just always swung at fist plus head for 2 to 3 damage, depending on how well you roll. Holy Spear legitimately seems like there is almost no argument for using this instead of just using a Cyclopean Hammer. And that's the biggest reason I expect Cyclopean Hammer to get tabooed. It's not that I find Cyclopean Hammer's current power level super offensive, I kind of do. But it's because it completely invalidates a capstone of an archetype build, and that shouldn't be happening. Jacob Morrison's another really big payoff card. He's just lucky on a stick, but you have to be drawing Bless tokens to refresh him. He's very, very good. I don't know if I think he's reliably drawn enough, and there's a lot of other things competing for your attention in a Bless deck, and we'll talk about that more later when we get into a specific Bless deck. For a Bless deck, Nephthys is simultaneously payoff and upkeep. Due to 3 cost, 3 experience ally asset, gives you +1 head, 2/2 soak. But whenever Bless tokens are revealed anywhere, you just seal them on Nephthys instead. And then you can exhaust her and release 3 Bless tokens, either just put them back in the bag, or remove them from play and deal 2 damage to an enemy at your location. Both effects are very good. Whether you're dealing testless damage, which is just very, very good, or you're just keeping your Bless tokens going forever, Nephthys is a very strong card. But at 4 experience, she is kind of prohibitively expensive on the experience front and probably doesn't make it into the decks that I'm planning, unfortunately. Rite of Sanctification is a Bless card that I want to like. It is theoretically one of the best economy cards in the game, but because it requires you to hit Bless tokens before you play it, I don't like it. Economy cards that have hoops to step through tend to be the less good economy cards because you need to play them immediately to play all your other cards. If I draw this and I don't hit Tempt Fate or Keep Faith, then Rite of Sanctification kind of does nothing. And that's a bad spot to be in for a card, unfortunately. And as we come over to the decks that I'm planning for my run through Dark Matter with Sister Mary and Father Mateo, let me go quickly check the poll still says I'm doing that. Yeah, the Bless build is currently winning 2-1 to just Sister Mary Lola Hayes. So, coming back to this, it's not at all like what I expected it to be originally. I'm surprised I found a way to make Down the Rabbit Hole work outside of a purple character. That stands out to me a lot. But originally, when I looked at Sister Mary, I was like, I'm probably going to flex find clues with 6 cents. I'm almost certainly running a Nephthys. Neither of those things are happening. And the reason for that's pretty straightforward. The experience cost of this deck is just astronomically high. You need Stick to the Plan and a big weapon in any main blue fighter. You can disagree with me on that, but that's how I feel very adamantly. So you're already looking at 10, 16, 17 experience just for the Ever Vigilant Stick to the Plan Holy Spear package. As a 3-fist fighter, I'm just not going to be running a Sister Mary without Ace of Swords and Beat Cops. You need to fix that. It's not good enough. Having just played Skids, I can confidently say that 3 fists is a huge problem. To quickly cover another couple of cards that just seem like they obviously need to be in the deck, Prepare for the Worst and Emergency Cache are what are going under my Stick to the Plan. Stand Together level 3, Ward of Protection level 2, and Promise of Power are some of the best cards in the game. Deny Existence is needed to prevent Sister Mary's weakness from just ruining my Bless build, otherwise either I die, or all the Bless tokens turn into Curse tokens, and that's not a great spot either. And at this point, the number of cards I haven't mentioned are Hallowed Mirror level 3, one of the best healing cards in the game. Enchanted Blades, which are my backup weapons. Spectral Razors, which are like a very powerful healing tech card, or fighting tech card rather, that costs 0 experience. Tempt Fate, which just helps us get online faster and makes my deck thinner. And then several level 2 skills that all very directly make me better at my job, except for Guts, which I can throw at Father Mateo, or myself on a Mythos test since I have Forehead. And these are all also 1 experience cards because I'm down the rabbit hole. So my issue with the Sister Mary build is I felt like I have a very little room to do something like get a 6th Sense online, because I'm not just investigating at 4 with 6th Sense. It's not very good. I need some head bonuses somewhere. And things like Brother Xavier or Bandoliers don't really feel like they have a good reason to be in the deck. And that makes it hard to fit something like 6th Sense in here, because I've added so many new cards to flex Find Clues. And to get payoff cards like a Nephthys in here, I would need a Charisma or to replace my Beat Cops. That's not going to work either. And ultimately, what this Sister Mary is doing is she's mostly here as a Bless battery using her abilities, and then trying to make herself function as a fighter with Holy Spear. Beyond that, I'm hoping to provide team utility with Stand Together, Ward of Protection, and get Hallowed Mirror online as fast as I can. For me, I think the point of Sister Mary, the way she's best built, and this is all theoretical, I was going to say this is my first time building Sister Mary. This is my first time building her as a fighter. I've tried before to make her a 6th Sense-based blooper, and it did not go well. I have a very negative opinion of her from that. But this time, building her like this as a fighter, I think she's best used as the battery in a Bless build, where she's just using a Holy Spear and trying to get by as a fighter while providing meaningful team support with all of these skills, with Guts, with Promise of Power, with the Ward of Protections and Stand Togethers, and thinning her deck really quickly with things like Tempt Fate and Stick to the Plan, Upgraded Emergency Cache, just drawing as fast as you can to get set up as a functional fighter and help someone else do the Bless thing with some other payoff cards. Something I repeatedly thought about when I was making this deck is, can I fit in backpacks? There's a very real argument that something somewhere should be cut for backpacks, and that might happen before I start the series. Because I really do want to more reliably find this Holy Spear. I don't want to just, draw a couple of cards, use an Enchanted Blade if I miss it, prepare for the worst on, turn 4, not hit Holy Spear, and just be screwed. So getting backpacks in here would be really nice, but I have to figure out what I'm cutting for them. The really awkward thing about this deck, though, is because it's a down the rabbit hole deck, pretty much everything just downgrades directly. Even things like Ace of Swords Ever Vigilant stay in the deck, so I'm using In the Thick of It with Horror Trauma, because why wouldn't I? I'm 5/9 split. It's pretty much always right to pick In the Thick of It. So when you come down to level 0 deck, the Holy Spears are 45 automatics, and the rest of this deck is basically the exact same. No, it is the exact same, actually. And this is a much bigger issue at level 0, I feel, because these are not infinite. These only have 4 uses. This deck gets to attack 8, 6, 14, 16 times. I have 16 attacks in me, and then I'm done. And that feels like a sketchy place for a fighter to live. So I'd also really like to get some backpacks in here for the level 0 version as well. Likely the cut is either Tempt Fate or Guts. With Sister Mary more than anyone else, I feel mean for ranking her based on the assumption she's not being played with people who synergize with her. Because as a Bless character, she's more than any other character in the game meant to be run with people who synergize with her. And I wonder if I should just rank her based on the assumption you're playing her with at least one other Bless character. That's not entirely unfair, I don't think. That's actually an interesting discussion point. You tell me in the comments how you feel I should be evaluating your teammates when I rank characters. How much support can you expect someone to give you? Obviously, Winifred can't expect a Father Mateo to be in the back to fix her autofails and turn them into amazing stars. But Sister Mary expecting Bless people to be in her team might be completely reasonable. I'm not sure where the line is. You tell me. Anyway, moving over to Father Mateo, I like his deck much more. I think he has a much more likely chance of doing well. 70 experience made me realize this. Coming back quickly to this Sister Mary deck, the Down the Rabbit Hole gives you 14 experience over the course of a campaign, provided you're able to use all 14 individual 1-point upgrades. This deck very easily can. And then it taxes you 1 for every card that's not on your starter deck. For us, that's going to be Sacred Covenant, Stick to the Plan, both Holy Spears. So it's plus 10 experience, plus 3 more because I'm taking In the Thick of It. I plan for level 40 decks. This is a level 53 deck, so we're good. This is a reasonable endgame expectation. Now, coming over to Father Mateo with his 70 experience deck, I have Father Mateo's 5 experience, 14 from Down the Rabbit Hole, 14 from Arcane Research, totaling 33 additional experience. We're looking for a 73 experience deck, and wouldn't you know it, that's pretty much exactly where we landed. Almost everything in our deck starts off in our deck. The only exceptions are Relic Hunter, Ancient Covenant, Favor of the Sun, Blessing of Isis, and Twilight Catherine Price. We can start off with Favor of the Sun, Ancient Covenant in our deck, and then we only have to pay 2, 4, 5 in taxes. So this is a 42 experience deck, not the 70 experience that it claims it is. At least in terms of how much experience another character in the campaign would have had. With this deck, our plan is very explicitly play all the clue finding assets, use Twilight to get obscene amounts of value out of Rite of Seeking and Clairvoyance by never letting them run out. We're going to be using Blessing of Isis as one of the huge payoff cards for our Blessed build, because we can use Favor of the Sun whenever we hit a Blessed token to instead turn into a star, get both of them back, and get an extra action. Alternatively, if we haven't hit a Bless at any point during our turn, on our last test we can just use Ancient Covenant with Favor of the Sun to guarantee a success. Alternatively, at any time during Sister Mary's turn, we could use Ancient Covenant on her. There's plenty of ways this card pays off, it's fantastic. But Blessing of Isis, specifically in Father Mateo, is a very good card. The big thing that I'm sad about with this deck is that I'm not really finding a good way to justify putting Mikosi into the deck. Twilight is giving me a lot more resources to use on these big spells, and that's really directly powerful. Whereas Mikosi just lets me hit more Bless tokens, and he costs an additional resource on top of it. So I have a really hard time justifying running Mikosi over her. I'm probably going to be honest, even though I think it's wrong. I'm going to. I think Mikosi is definitely worse. However, because Mikosi synergizes so directly with the Bless build, if I'm not running him here in Blessing of Isis Father Mateo, I'm probably never running him, so I'm going to give him a chance in this campaign. It's the very same reason I'm running Holy Spear. If it's ever worth playing, it's worth playing now, so let's give it its fair shot. But it's pretty straightforward. I'm doing the Seeker clue finding thing. I'm using Blessing of Isis nonsense on Father Mateo. I've got the blue rosaries to put in more curses, or more blesses rather. I've got Keep Faith, Tempt Fate, just because I might not need them as much anymore now that I'm with a Sister Mary, but it feels disingenuous to take them out. They're also level 0 cards. If I find this is way too much in my level 0 deck, what I can do is just keep the Read the Signs and cut a Tempt Fate instead when I'm adding new cards. And again, this level 0 deck looks very familiar because it's a Down the Rabbit Hole deck. Basically, you change out Mikosi and Blessing of Isis and a couple other cards, and it's the exact same deck. And of the two, I'm feeling much better about Father Mateo's deck. I feel like the extra actions and guaranteed successes we're pulling with Ancient Covenant and Blessing of Isis are probably going to be worth a lot more combined with just Mystics generally being very good than this Skids-esque 3-fist fighter with a Holy Spear that Sister Mary is doing. But before I go, I want to mention Ward of Radiance and ask all of you, because this video will be going live well before I start recording for my series. What Bless cards do you think I'm missing out on? Ward of Radiance feels conspicuously absent from both of these decks. It's just Ward of Protection at level 0 with no penalties. Ward of Protection level 2 at that. But you only get to use it if you reveal 5 random tokens in the back and you hit Bless or Star. The math on this doesn't seem that good, right? Actually, coming down to this post, who is this? Elkincrad, thank you so much. I'm going to trust that your math is right. But, like, looking at this is really strong. Does Mikosi work with reveals, or is he only during skill tests? Yeah, it just says reveals. It works with reveals. Holy shit. Okay, no. Ward of Radiance goes in this deck. I'm glad I looked at this in the math. Holy shit. Fearless is definitely out. It was already the card I was beginning to cut. What's the other cut for the other Ward of Radiance? I'm looking at Tempt Fate, because I'm playing alongside a Sister Mary. But I think if this were an independent Father Mateo deck, if I were running it just in another group, I would always run the Tempt Fate. I think it's fair, but I'm not doing that. So why would I run the Tempt Fate? Or at least why would I run the second one? And I think that's fair. And now that I'm saying this, I realize like maybe it's fair if I'm ranking Sister Mary on being in a Blessed team. Maybe if I think any character is optimally a Blessed character, I rank them based on how they do in a Blessed team. But I think this is obviously correct. If the math on Word of Radiance is as good as it looks like it is, and Mikosi works with it, it definitely belongs in Father Mateo. And Mikosi doesn't specify you, it works on other people at your location. Which means I can use Mikosi for Sister Mary's Father Mateo, or Ward of Radiance rather, as well. And coming to my level 0 Father Mateo deck real quick, you can see that I'm just starting with Favor of the Sun, Ancient Covenant. I'm hard-pressed to imagine there's any better set of cards to start with for his initial experience. Quickly coming back to this Sister Mary deck, though, I was talking about wanting backpacks and now Ward of Radiance. I think I'm comfortable cutting the Tempt Fate for the Ward of Radiance, but I also like having the Tempt Fate because it can help me keep my Holy Spear fueled. Like, that is actually specifically relevant. But this is the problem, right? What the hell do you cut? 8 copies of Ward of Protection in a 2-player campaign might be too much, but it probably isn't. Like, what does it even mean to have too many copies of Ward of Protection? I really like level 2 Guts in a 4-head character, even if I only use it defensively, but I'm alongside a Mystic, so it gets even better. Guts and Tempt Fate are the cards I'm looking at cutting, and that doesn't feel good to me. I think the Overpower is actually unnecessary. I think the Overpower, if I'm not using Holy Spear, isn't that good, and I'd be using it primarily to draw closer to Holy Spear. So I don't see much point in the Overpower, to be honest. Something like Guts to draw when I'm not fighting to find Holy Spear seems inherently better. So the cards I'm looking at cutting now are really Spectral Razor, Ward of Radiance, Guts, Backpack, Promise of Power, like really important good cards in the deck. Which is always a good place to be. If you feel like you're having a hard time cutting cards on a deck, that usually means the deck is doing pretty well. When you can make a cut easily, that's when things are probably not very optimal. I don't like it, but I think it's the Tempt Fate. I'm doing enough to put Blesses in the bag just by being Sister Mary. I don't need to run the Tempt Fate. I just have to assume that my teammates aren't going to do too much shenanigans and just take all my Bless tokens without putting any in the bag themselves. And between Keep Fates and Holy Rosaries and our 1-up Tempt Fate, I think that's true. Also, we substantially lowered the experience count of this deck, which is good because there's a card in it that's missing that I wanted to run. I'm sure someone was noticing very conspicuously that a Watchful piece wasn't in the deck. It's beyond greedy to cut Uncage the Soul because I'm running alongside a Sister Mary with Stand-Togethers and a lot of draw, right? The last cuts in the Father Mateo deck are also super, super difficult. I can save a lot of experience by cutting this Hallowed Mirror, and the Sister Mary deck is better at finding her Hallowed Mirror anyway. So that cuts out 7 experience in the decks by removing that Hallowed Mirror. We don't need 2 copies of Hallowed Mirror in the same group, and this deck really doesn't need to feel like it's responsible for healing the team. It's not doing great on Soak, though. It has no Deny existence, only 1/2/2 ally. Defensive stats are good, but not incredible. Unfortunately, cutting the Hallowed Mirror really doesn't feel right to me. Do I cut my second Clue Finding spell? Is 4 just enough? Probably not, right? Like, that's the whole reason I put Backpacks in the Sister Mary deck, is just 4 isn't enough. I'm going to cut down to just Rite of Seeking and see how that feels. It probably feels bad, but I'm interested. And a big part of the reason that I don't like Clairvoyance is very specifically that I am Father Mateo. I'm going to be getting stars disproportionately more often and taking that to horror disproportionately more often. I think this is probably okay. And at that point, I actually don't like the Uncage the Souls because I don't have nearly as many targets for them. I just don't think there's a good solution for my economy anywhere else either. Right now, I'm just looking at this deck thinking, I wish my economy was better, but I really wish I was running True Magic and Twyla. That said, like, yeah, if I spent 19 more experience, of course the deck would be better. It's not really a hot take that True Magic and Twyla improves a deck. I think for now, I'm just going to put a card in and call it a day. If I had any way of accelerating draw more, this is the big thing that always hurts me when I'm looking at Blessed decks, is the amount of cards that go into being a Blessed deck. Because if I didn't have all this, I'd be like, oh, I can run Scroll of Prophecies to find cards faster. That lets me use Backpack to find the Scroll of Prophecies, and all this draw lets me run the True Magic. And then I use Twyla to keep my True Magic fueled forever. And it all sort of like clicks together then. But since I have so many cards locked because I need the Mystic stuff, I need the Blessed stuff, it's really hard to fit anything super crazy in the deck. And Mystic, at least Mono Mystic, kind of struggles with Economy. And I don't think I can do better than this for the Economy. So I'm probably just trying to put the best draw card I can into the deck right now that doesn't cost me money. Which is a very short list. For now, I'm going to throw in a 1 of Radiant Smite to remind myself when I come back to this deck, consider like adding something to Flex Fight even just a little bit. But I'm not sure what the final card should be or exactly what the final deck should be. But that's a good example of exactly what I'm talking about. The decks aren't really locked in right now. I'm not confident in how I'm building them. Ward of Radiance is apparently obviously supposed to be included, but I felt very iffy about the math before I looked at that chart. So if there are any other cards that you're thinking that obviously should be in my decks that are missing, I'd love to hear about them. I've probably got at least a couple more days before I have finalized decks and I start recording. Anyways, I've been rather incoherent. This has been a rambly video about my deck building process for Bless characters and my pre-existing notions about them. I'll see you in the next one.